Hey, Aaron, can you hear us okay?
Yep.
Okay.
It thumbs up.
Yeah,
Let me, I'm gonna stop sharing your PowerPoint and then we should be good to go. So we're going. Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, go down.
Like for 4:45, my apologies to everybody involved. So they had bail pass down the lane, so what was a 45-minute drive turned into 2 hours. So I apologize for everybody being late, making everybody else have to do this. So what we're doing, which is meeting number 2 for anybody who watches now or on tape. This is meeting number 2 of the housing deed restriction conversation. In the original conversation, we were going to have this meeting to cover the 9 or so additional topics that are part of the deed restrictions. I think Katie will explain it became overburdensome to consider 9, so we're going to do 3. And then we'll have another meeting to continue on the list of additional topics to be discussed. So everybody good with that? Katie, it's yours to go forward.
Great.
Thank you.
Yes, so,
Apologize, but I am really sorry. Thank you.
okay, part 2. So similar to the last work session, the plan for this one is to basically give a quick recap of why we're looking at this and then go over just a few topics, eligible household income buffer, qualified capital improvements, and asset limit testing, so that the council has an understanding of what those categories are that could be outlined and or regulated within a housing restrictive covenant. Moving forward from those, wanna each time ask if you have anything you've thought of since the last conversations that we've had that you want us to do some more research and return to you with. And then obviously any questions you have, I'm happy to answer, not just in the end, but throughout the presentation. I did wanna note, we are, and this was in the staff report, but we are collecting public comments, including the ones that were heard at the last meeting, the ones that were received in writing before the last meeting, and then since the last meeting, you had an email that all the council received from the board's pitch. So I just kind of wanted to recognize that we have those, we're taking them in, and they're all being kept in the record in case the council ever wants to review them. And then also addressing a little bit more background information that I'll only get into tonight if you request me to, is information that Breckenridge gave us in response to the request last time to provide more information on how they calculate resale calcs. I don't know if anyone had time to really dive into that information yet or not, so happy to touch base on that or kind of table that for a later discussion based on what the council wants. And that was all included as attachment D in your. So just really briefly, again, why we're here, we started hearing more concern from some owners of restricted properties that primarily stemmed, we started hearing more feedback received after the SCHA table was modified in May of 2024. That those modifications made, just to keep in mind why it was the SCHA board's goal to keep buyer affordability and housing costs at less than 30% of income to meet that general definition that we talked about last time. Because of those changes that were made to that table, and the fact that that table is connected with a resale calculation on our 2019 covenant, that stemmed a lot of kind of complaints and concerns from the public who were worried about how it would affect their resale calculations for their permitted housing units. A reminder on the 2019 covenant, it's not required, it's just an option that people could opt into if they chose to. They still can choose to opt into it. And one of our kind of later conversations at a future meeting on this topic will be if we will continue to let them or if we'll end that covenant. So if they have it, but no one else may be able to move forward with it in the future if the council decides to just extinguish that from here. We'll kind of, that be more of the wrap up discussion on the covenants. So you don't need to read this, you've seen it a lot, just kind of referencing because I referenced the table, just as a reminder of what that table is. And I'll get into that on one of the topics tonight also. So I'm gonna skip the definitions of housing restrictive covenants, why we have them. This slide was shown to you last time. If anyone wants to have this review, speak up, but also just keep going through it. So same thing with general reminder, Frisco has approximately 155 covenants recorded on properties. About 40 of those are live work without an income cap on them. And the rest are primarily value cap tied to the AMI. So starting the topic of eligible household income. This is a topic that we have a variety in Frisco of how it's handled right now based on the historical nature of some different covenants and how those covenants came about. The reason or the question that we're posing to council on this topic is, does council want to include an income buffer? And if there was an income buffer, it would allow prospective buyers to have a higher household income than what is currently allowed. And so I'm gonna break this down for you, and it was broken down in your packet, but essentially, if it's 100% AMI unit, you look at the chart to find the eligible household and what they can make. And that's the limit. And if the household makes more than that, then they don't qualify for that 100%. Also, that means that they are realistically within 30% of their income going into that sale price on the chart.
Are you okay with question?
Yes, please.
Conversational question. Can you explain the difference between a buffer and just a higher AMI?
Yes, so the advantage or disadvantage, depending on what side you look, I'll flip to this screen. And I know it's hard to see, but if you're familiar enough with this. The buffer allows the household to make more money, but doesn't increase the way our 2019 covenant uses this chart, the number on the bottom for a sale price. 100% unit would still sell at 100% rate, but an eligible household, the top couple rows would go up if there was a buffer. So the sale price stays the same, but there's a bit of a cushion for those households to make more money and still qualify for that unit.
But is there a difference between staying on the top of the income as opposed to the price? Is there a difference between 100%, 110% AMI or 100% AMI with a 10% buffer? Why don't we just call it, you can buy this house if you have up to 110% AMI?
And that is it, as long as people understand the unit, it's still locked in that 100% number.
Okay.
Through the 2019 covenant. Now, we also, as we know, and that's a really great point, we know that we're looking at not using this chart anymore for resale calculations. That's gonna be one of the biggest topics of, is it worth using this chart at all? If not, then that other than an initial sale price, that 100 versus 120% or any AMI will really only reference the household income in the future,
So it'll only have to do with qualification,
not sale price.
sale price or resale price.
Initial sale price, we might need to use that just to have us starting.
Can I ask why you would be considering that as far as like I don't think there's a problem finding people at 100% to meet the 100% requirement. Like, why would we give it to somebody with a higher AMI?
And that's a great question. So again, these aren't necessarily recommendations from town staff. They're more the council becoming aware of things they could have, what others in the community are doing. And so flipping over to this, the only reason we're bringing it up is that we don't want council to not consider it and then someone asks them later why and they didn't feel like they were fully informed on all the options that are out there. So to your point, Andy, the 2019 covenant has a 20% buffer if it doesn't go under contract within 30 days. We have not seen any property within the town of Frisco that went into that 2019 covenant ever not go under contract within, I want to even say 7 to 10 days, but definitely not within, they all go under contract within 30 days.
But it does contemplate if it doesn't.
Yeah, if
Right.
it starts happening,
Right.
it's not happening
Which
now.
it could.
And it was,
The AMI chart,
yeah, and it was around 2010 that it started to do that. And that was when the council, for example, for our own South End Village, which is the 50 units by the elementary school, they added a 10% increase for those properties, because at that time they weren't selling. And they felt like they were listed in a low enough price, they shouldn't have to sell lower, so they added that buffer. Right now in the market today,
How many used it in that? South Florida, still?
I don't know, I
Okay,
have to look,
okay.
yeah, I can look for you before another
Yeah.
meeting. Okay,
And so it automatically would kick in if it doesn't sell it.
yeah, and then it's automatic without a period of time. For example, on your Breckenridge, their Blue 52 development. And I don't know what their AMI is, but they automatically get a 30% income buffer. So. I did want to review, it is a positive or a negative. It's really based on perspective. And I think you've all kind of realized this, but if it's a larger buyer pool, then obviously the seller has more assurance that someone could purchase the house. Also, if there's a higher household income, then if a household has financial burdens such as student loans, car payments, childcare, where they may make a little bit more, they might feel more comfortable buying the lower unit. And then obviously it could be a negative from perspectives of who are within that original cap and don't think that they should have competition with others. Losing that affordability stretch of buyers. So, and this is really a topic that I don't know if you're ready to make a comment. I'm happy to hear it if you are, but it was something to make sure you are aware of, and that there are options for the town to have an income buffer if they chose to.
I think it's great. I mean, I think it's great that you have the set plan, but if the plan isn't working, then we expand the buyer pool. So, you know, it doesn't make sense to me to expand the buyer pool before you explore the first priority level.
So the council,
I like the way it is. Just-
so keep it 30 days, 20, the way it is in the 2019 covenant. You can have that buffer, so it doesn't go under contract living in place.
As you've seen, it hasn't really been used small. So I think it's a good opportunity in case we do see that happen. Make sure that the homes are moving.
And if
Should
it
it be
didn't
like
happen,
10% in 90 days, or should it stay at 20% in 30 days? And I think that's the kind of question too. I mean, it's,
it is if you wanted to change it and consider one of those.
I don't know.
Doesn't sound like we have any experience to draw on.
And then the other side of it, where people could say, well, if they didn't qualify in 30 days, maybe that price could sell for a little less than you can feel comfortable buying it with my 100% AMI. So just keep that in mind too. So staff is completely fine having either the same covenant, or if we end up drafting a new covenant, keeping the language in 2019. Because after 30 days, open it up to 20%.
I don't think that what it is.
That's his.
I mean, and it comes with also, I mean, this is a very soft opinion, but the less we change, the better.
Yeah.
So if we're indifferent, let's not try to find reasons to change it more.
You wanna- Yeah.
Andy, are you in? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm basically in like it. You know, it seems reasonable to keep it as it is at 20% if the property does not go under contract for 30 days. But obviously that hasn't even been an issue. So why, you know, I'd like, I'd sooner go to the 10% in 90 days. Because that gives people at 100% more opportunity to get in there. But, you know, if it's, you know, I'm probably okay just leaving it as it is. I would not go straight up 20% income buffer. I think that's unfair. It's unfair to people who are making 100, and they'll lose that unit to people who are making more. That's why we have AMI levels. So at this point, I guess it's keep it as it is.
I'm fine to talk about it, you know, the 10%, 90 days, you know, or the 20, like you said. both of them are in our covenants.
When we bring this whole set of things back to you, we can reiterate what your preference was tonight, but offer the other option as well.
Okay.
All right, thanks. Okay, moving on to qualifying capital improvements. A refresher on this is that in some of our existing covenants, they are called permitted capital improvements. So same exact thing may qualify differently, but it's being used interchangeably as a term. This is gonna come into play a lot as you consider your maximum resale calculation. So for example, as we talked about in the last meeting, if you consider 2% a year or 3% a year plus qualifying capital improvements. And so this all factors into that resale price calculation. So, sorry, the top of this is cut off. There we go. Okay, does council want to change made to QCI from the 2019 covenant, which does not have a maximum cap on the amount of qualified capital improvements an owner may add to their sale price? I'm gonna get into that a little bit because in a way, it's a little bit misleading. I realize as I read this now, there is in theory a cap because you are capped to the number on the spreadsheet here right now in the 2019 covenant. So if your 3% a year hits this, then you don't get more capital improvements under the 2019 covenant. So I think the way I wrote this, it sounds a little bit misleading. I apologize for that. If you are under this number, you can add capital improvements. And so there's a little bit of flexibility and it's case by case basis. We have some that have been able to add over 80,000 or $100,000 of capital improvements. And we have some who at 3% a year hits their max and they are so, and unfortunately they can't add anything, which are, I think some of the owners you've been hearing from on this topic. So just to kind of, again, a quick review of other options around that are being utilized around the county. Breckenridge, some of their newer developments, they allow 3 to 5% of the purchase price to be added for approved maintenance items. And again, I just want to put in a disclaimer, this is not for all covenants in Breck or all covenants in Summit County. Similar to Frisco, everyone has so many different ones. This is pulled on it, some of the most recent ones and the ones that were easily accessible for staff. Summit County has started allowing in a total amount not to exceed 10% of the initial purchase price over every 10 years. And then our 2019 covenant, and I'll flash this up in a minute, we have a 5 and a 20-year schedule. And peak one original covenants are also a bit complicated. I'll get into those a little bit so you can see what's existing under those covenants. And then the only other ones that I could find in Frisco that through the ones I pulled that had capital improvements were South End Village again. A couple of those units were permitted capital improvements at 10% of the original sale price. So you can see a lot of the towns and covenants are looking at a percentage of the sale price to limit how much you can add. You can come up with a percentage such as that, or you cannot have you can allow as many capital improvements as people can qualify for. The more capital improvements you add, the more the homes will be maintained and in better condition. It also will lead to higher resale calculations and therefore we'll lose a little bit of that buyer.
Can I jump in?
Yep.
Yeah, so 100%, why on earth would we want to limit the improvements they're going to do on their house? If they're actually going to do them, they should realize their investment. And we don't want to hinder the potential ability to do ADUs on all this stuff in the future. So if all of a sudden, you're going to be able to build a garage with an ADU attached to it on your property, but it will cost, because nowadays it costs a hell of a lot more. It's going to cost as much as it costs to get in your home in the first place 10 years ago. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. So I think whatever improvements you do should be able to be included in there, whatever with depreciation and whatever it needs. But I wouldn't want to hinder everyone like by 10% of the initial purchase price, because then people are gonna pick and choose whether or not you fix your siding or you do your roof. That's all.
Council agree, if I'm okay, if everyone agrees, you want me to end this topic now, or do you want me to keep going? Your choice.
Well, I mean, the alternative could be that somebody could make improvements that are qualifying. That are so expensive that it takes it out of the realm of affordability for the designated AMI of that. It's possible.
That's my initial.
Because we're getting rid of the AMI, so you're thinking. is that
No,
why?
the AMI will always be tagged to qualification,
Okay,
to be qualified to buy the house.
okay.
But if someone adds 200, I mean, I don't know if that's possible, but.
Yeah.
But if they add $200,000 of value to that property through this QCI program. Can for instance, an 88% AMI person, qualified person still afford to buy that house? That's a hypothetical, I don't even know.
But isn't the resale value is the AMI, the max price, so if they do $200,000. And 80%, they're not gonna,
Right,
they're gonna exceed the price, no? Or
If it continues to use that chart.
if it continues, you
If
can,
the town is not, if the town decides not to use this chart, it does help. You could say, just taking a broad example, because a lot of homes are 3% a year in the original covenants. You could have, when you bought it, 3% a year,
Mhm.
compounded or not compounded up to the council, plus unlimited capital improvement. And that's what you could list that price as. Now, if you don't find a qualified buyer, say it's 80% household, you can't sell it. You're gonna have to lower that price until you do. And therefore, you're probably gonna be frustrated. You thought you were gonna get all this money and you may not, or you may find a qualified buyer, even though they're at 100% because they may have a whole lot of assets, which is our next conversation.
Right, so I think the question more goes to, are we willing? So say you bought in at 100% AMI, and then you're gonna build an accessory dwelling unit and a garage on your property, you're raising the value of, and then the AMI level of that particular home.
no, you're not changing the AMI level of that home.
Right, but somebody at that AMI level would need to be able to afford that extra 200 grand on top of there because they're getting extra rental income and whatever else was added to the home. Like it doesn't make sense to me to hinder how people will improve their places. Right now, nobody's improving anything,
Well,
right?
Andy, I think, Andy, one is that you have ADUs in your head, I have repair and maintenance in mind. Under qualified capital improvements, I looked through it, do we have a reasonable, do we have to approve it if somebody says, I wanna put, some type of really funky, super expensive shingle on my roof, on the roof when they have to replace the roof. And they say, well, who cares? I'm getting it back when I sell the house. Do we have the ability to create reasonableness in approved repairs and maintenance?
It's a good question. We don't for situations like that, as far as, I'm trying to think of where we.
I mean, when you replace a washing
Yeah.
machine, you can buy a washing machine for $300 and literally $20,000.
Yes, and we just look at what that costs.
If they want all $20,000,
Yeah,
that means
good point.
that would be a.
Yeah, you
Reasonable.
call out asphalt roof shingles in here, so somebody's not gonna be able to put on a steel roof, which costs about double, right? So you can't do it there. It's a little ridiculous that somebody in the 100 AMI category is gonna go buy a $20,000 washing machine because they think they're gonna get it out of the end. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Because you're honest. Meaning people do things to create scenario, and I just want to be in front of it. If we're gonna have an unlimited qualifying capital improvements. It shouldn't be unlimited.
A good point for the council to think about. Yeah, and then a disclaimer that if it doesn't have a building permit and it requires it, we won't give it to them, but we do allow anybody, and this just happened recently, to retroactively apply for it. So like, if there was a lot of conversation last time on boilers, most of them never had their mechanic or plumber pull permits. We let them come in now, pull a permit, it gets inspected, shows it's up to code, and we'll give them that. And in a way, they almost made out better because it's based on today's date instead of 8 years ago when it would have already lost appreciation. Like,
And
there's a
you
lot of loopholes that we haven't figured out how to get around.
Pretty big one.
You could add some things like, builder's level, equal to builder's level, products, which are not, high-end products.
Yeah, you could, that's pretty, that's gonna be really tough to administer, though.
Just reasonable and.
Sure, but what about, yeah, the improvements, are we separating, or do we want to separate the idea for these additions instead of improvements, right? Improvements being more roof, siding, whatever has to get replaced. But if you're gonna build a garage on your property, which many people have already done there, that's a separate item, right? And now you're not allowed to add water or anything else to your garage because we don't allow ADUs. So these are also two separate categories, right? Improvements might just be listed under replacing things that need to be replaced as opposed to major additions.
So major additions and ADUs, which are allowed in P1 right now, are categorized on this before you get to the depreciation schedule. So they actually are separated. You do get full cost on those added to your resale calc. So anyone who's built a garage after they bought the unit without a garage, they came in, they built a garage. That full value that was put on the building permit is added, and that garage is or addition, for example, would not depreciate. So they actually are already separated.
So to
Okay,
be
so
clear-
then wait, sorry, Martin, if I can.
That's okay.
This goes exactly to what I'm saying. How is it then the same value of AMI if you have now added a garage to your unit? Because now your value of your place, is up $100,000 or whatever.
To be clear, Andy, when I say the same AMI, that's for qualification to buy, not for what the unit is worth.
Right, but how is 100% AMI where it was valued at, say, whatever, $300,000, and then you added $100,000 of garage, and now you're trying to sell for $400,000? How does a 100% AMI person get approved for that?
Yeah, I agree, that's an issue.
Yeah, so that has happened already in the neighborhood. In other words, we're raising the AMI value of that particular unit. That's happened a couple times already.
What's the depreciation schedule? Is that somewhere in this package?
Yeah, it's hidden under I think it's the exhibit or attachment that is the actual covenant in 2019. And then in that document, it's exhibit B in there. It starts on page 23
All right, thank you.
of that exhibit.
Sorry, Martin, I cut you off, like you can.
No, you're asking the same questions I am, Andy. That's,
Okay.
Why is the furnace, since we hear so many, why is that just an improvement, not, it's not on a schedule of 5 to 20 years? Is it,
So
it comes with it's saying it coming with the base price of the house. But if somebody replaces their furnace at 30,000, they can't get any money.
No, they
back
do.
because that's, do they?
Yeah.
Still?
it's on the depreciation.
It's a replaced appliance.
Oh,
Yeah, it's on there.
that's a replaced plant.
So yeah, we are giving
Okay.
boilers.
That's actually a really good example of, I don't want to buy the same, pardon me, piece of shit furnace that they put in there, and I want to buy a better furnace.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna last longer and it's gonna heat better. And now you've raised the value of your furnace. right?
So the one thing is the 5 year for a furnace though is kind of a short depreciation. Is that something you guys think that?
Well,
It should be 5 years, cause the furnace is like 20 years when you buy it.
But some of those things are like, you can't live without it.
Yeah,
I mean, so there's probably some of that in the play of depreciation schedule and I'm, you know, the depreciation schedule, we could have lots of conversations.
Yeah, yeah.
about. But, you know, if you don't have a water heater,
Mhm.
you know, you're not gonna be able to live in the home. It's not habitable. So maybe that has a different depreciation schedule because it's an absolute necessity.
Yeah.
Um,
There's just a question on it, I'm asking on it, cause I was, you know,
I
you
wonder
hear
if
so much
there's
about the furnace.
Like, is there Fannie Mae, they have all their guidelines.
We
for
can look
it.
into that and bring that back. My recollection of when this one came into play in 2019 was because there wasn't a whole lot around that anyone could find. I believe we took it from Vail, cause they had just recently started it in their Vail and Deed program. And then the council had asked for a couple of other primarily solar and some other things to be added that they thought of that should be in here. But I believe it came from Vail and then council added a few others. So it definitely, this is not set in stone, obviously in 2019, but this is a topic that the council can change the years, the schedule. It doesn't have to be this.
Been utilized and worked okay for the last 5 years.
Yeah, we haven't had any trouble with it as staff. Our biggest problem is that most people don't pull permits for things they need it for, and then we tell them, we're not gonna give them the money unless they do, and they have to retroactively get a permit. And then the only other thing is there's one recently, they had every right to, they were very good at managing all of their receipts, and Emma probably spent over 12 or 16 hours. We had to go through every shrub and tree that they planted and everything. So they had just happened to be good record keepers, and they had a lot, and they got to add them all on, and they did, and we did. It just took a while to go through all of the credit card statements they gave us and receipts. Other than the staff time that, because they had so many. It was, I mean, they had ceiling fan receipts and everything. Yeah, it was, I mean, that was the point of it, and they were smart to keep that, and they had enough room in their calculation under the 2019 covenant they went into to add all of the improvements, and then they went under contract right away to acquire. So we're great for them. That was the intent of it.
So right now, to clarify, ADUs, they are allowed in P one.
Per zoning, they're allowed.
Do we have any ADUs?
We don't, and I will tell you that I have a couple of suspicions of why. One being most of the layouts out there aren't conducive to building a second because the lots are so tiny. There are ones that have garages that could build up as they do in Wellington. When people inquire, not just on a deed restricted, but in general on ADUs, they seem to never come back because of one, construction costs right now. And two, the cost of the tap fees that I think Andy mentioned. The town is planning on talking to council after the housing strategic plan if we should be using 5A money to encourage, to help reimburse people for tap fees, because we don't do that right now. The other thing is that if you have an ADU, it's required to be restricted to rent to somebody at 100 or 120% AMI. So anyone who comes in market rate or deed restricted doesn't find it's worth the money to build it. What they get out of it is a rental.
The county actually is running an ADU incentive program where we're kind of waiting to hear the results of that and where they go with it, because I think most places in Colorado, well, Grand Junction is a different example, lower property values, but at high property value areas and construction costs, it's just astronomical to incentivize the building of ADUs.
But if you get,
Especially for deed restricted ADUs.
yeah, if you get 50,000 off, and it costs you 300,000 to build it.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna wanna calculate a return on a net investment through your rents, and it's just hard to do.
And so right now, if someone was to build an ADU in P one, decided to go ahead and put money down into it, the amount they would be able to rent would be restricted. All the rent would go to them.
Correct.
The price of that construction would then, how would that be added to the value of the home?
It would go 100% into what they could resell, so if they
So no
value
appreciation on that either.
not have that.
They would receive the rent. throughout put it there. And then they would be putting that amount of money on top of the purchase price though, which very easily would put it out of.
And
What else to complicate it more? The buyer would have a rental stream that at that point wasn't included in their income calculation.
it's gonna get real, as Councilman Pell is pointing out, it's gonna get really complicated for an 80 or 100% qualified buyer to afford that unit.
Absolutely.
Or for a mortgage company to figure all that out. I mean, that sounds complicated as well.
How about just the parking?
Well, the parking restriction.
Because you're building, you're building on your parking area, full garage. So you have your 2 cars in your 3-bedroom house, then you have a renter, and then you have your kid has a car, it's like they're already parking sideways.
For purposes of this topic.
Some of that goes towards,
Use included in the conversation, are we making it harder, like, should we be complicating the conversation?
I don't think so. I guess the only reason I'm a little hesitant is you're gonna get more info on ADUs with the housing strategic plan, which I know most of you are fully involved in. Those of you who aren't will be seeing that soon. That I believe, and don't quote me on this, I think one of the recommendations is we don't have them as restricted as we do. We try to just more encourage ADUs. I think it is something that we should consider and we need to look at as far as reselling, because all the points you've all brought up are really good ones. It may be worth knowing this conversation isn't ending tonight. Maybe we also we learn more about ADUs in that strategic plan. Before, because I think you'll see that before we come back to you, I believe, on the next meeting. So, yeah, I think it's a good topic. These questions are very valid.
Put that one, the no pun intended, in the parking lot. For the rest of this element of deed restriction, where are we, how are we? For the,
Well, I think the way I look at it is your first threshold is, do you want a owner to be able to get unlimited amounts of addition for QCIs? Or do you want there to be some kind of limit on there?
Andy's back. To me, it's complicated, we want to
Yeah.
make sure that these units remain affordable to the target market that we're trying to hit.
I was gonna say, sorry to interrupt you. My recommendation is the council, I think it would be hard for you to make a firm answer to this question tonight when you don't quite know what your rest of the equation of the resale calculation is gonna be. I don't want you all to sit here and say, we want this, and maybe you agree to it, but then you discuss, do we want 2% a year or 3% a year or something else? And now all of a sudden you may wanna rethink what you allow for capital improvements, to your point of how does it all balance together?
Because if you decide to stay with the table and maximum resale value, that might be your cap. But if you go without the table and just go to a percentage increase, then you might have to think about a percentage cap. I mean, and you don't know the answer to the first side of it yet.
can I have two things that you raised? And I think one is, it's really interesting the way you said that if you put the boiler in 5 years ago and you don't get a permit for it until today, the depreciation clock doesn't start until today.
Yeah, and that
So
may be
you're-
staff's fault, that's how we're doing it.
So you're incentivizing people to not get a permit.
It's what it came up recently.
Okay, I would love to dive into that, or at least have.
And again, that we had our first situation with that this summer on that really long list. And so we did do it based on when they put it in, and maybe that was wrong on our part. We just hadn't came across that. We were, it's kind of a ambiguity, it's no clear direction in the covenant. So we also would be happy to take council's direction and clean that up in the future and not retroact to when it actually was built. But then they might never get a permit because their 5 years was over.
Yeah.
As part of the home buying process,
You're gonna find that out.
you're gonna find that out. Yeah, that's, that happens on everybody else's properties.
Yeah.
That aren't deed restricted. I don't know, that's one to keep on the table. And then I'm curious how others feel on some type of just a reasonableness of qualified improvements, and maybe it doesn't happen and maybe it never will happen. But I relate it to in neighborhoods that have restrictions for 2 and 3 dogs or cats. You don't put a deed restriction in place for the person who has 4 dogs or 5 cats. You do it so you have a recourse against the person who has 30 cats. So it's kind of just that. It's not something that would be actively enforced, but if we run into it, we have something in our deed restriction. It gives us a little bit of an ability to say, oh, no, that was not a reasonable repair or upgrade. Thoughts? I call that a soft.
You know, I really don't like it, you know, unlimited. You know, I'd like to maybe some kind of cap. Just so the prices do stay in there. You know, but where that cap is. You know, with the chart, maximum 3% or the AMI, is that, you know, are we gonna maybe use the AMI just for the capital, you know? It's so.
It's connected, it is all very connected.
I feel like to put some more real thought into this.
It's okay, and I think that's a very good answer. I mean, I think the community would appreciate too, that it's really connected and. Did you want anything, do you get enough direction from your last question?
Reasonableness on repairs? Not more.
I-
But just an ability for the town to have some ability to develop reasonableness.
So in other words, we're just looking right now for limited or unlimited.
No, this is more specific. Again, if somebody wants to come in and say, I want, you know. I bought a $30,000 dishwasher. Or coming to the town to say, can I buy? I don't know,
That's what you want.
Probably a bad example, but it's,
I think that's what he's asking, limited or unlimited?
That's the question right now.
That's
Are we
the
looking
question.
limited or unlimited? Is that the direction we're looking
Yeah.
for?
either
I
way,
think that's.
there should be reason. It's not just. You know, the person can go to unlimited because they did 50 repairs. I guess that's sort of one thought, and I'm with you in the, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
How much did your 50 repairs cost? But if one of those repairs was just ridiculous. And they come in and they want to be reimbursed for it at the time of sale, and we have no ability to police that. And I
I
don't
think
know.
you easily say nothing above builder's grade.
The other
Nothing
thing-
above builder's grade. And like, it's an industry standard, right? And you know, and on this personally, I think it's almost like we need to keep repairs separate from improvements. Right? So repairs, new boiler, siding, roofing, whatever is repairs, right? Improvements are what wasn't there before. And then you're adding that. But I am not for holding people back on those things. You know, I know people in Peak One who want to do accessory dwelling units for their own employees. And, you know, it's already hindered by the cost at this point.
I mean, aside from ADUs, if you're saying builder grade, then that's an Anderson low end window. But if the person wants to put in Marvin's,
Well, then that's their choice, but you're
But
only
that's
gonna
not-
get covered for, you know, builder's grade scale.
So that's kind of guess where, okay, I think I see what you're saying, Andy. If we want a limit on what they're gonna be able to recoup in the sale price, to make sure that that sale price of that home does not get out of a certain range of the target we're trying to hit. But should they want to, out of their own pocket, buy something at a higher grade, they would be allowed to, is they would not be allowed to recoup above a certain that builder's grade. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
And why don't I do some digging before our next meeting and see if any of the other jurisdictions have a set price or some more typical price instead of an unlimited. So for example, there might be the average cost of a window or a sliding door or a boiler that's recouped. So why don't I do some digging and see if there's some examples, and that could actually make it easier for everybody. If there was a standard value that we.
That'd be
could
nice.
use. So I'll take a look at that, and then I'll also look.
I think I'll take the liberty of saying we're speaking for all 4 of us. We're not trying to make this complicated and.
Yes.
Oh, but this is complicated.
You know, to find out what they call it.
No, see if there's something out there that other towns or county is using that might be able to actually solve a lot of these questions that we could go and talk about. And then I also want to see out of my, like, because Wellington has had some ADUs go on top of some garages out there. I will see, I'll talk to Breckenridge and see about how they recoup cost or if it's changed the value of the if the buyer income level has changed or any of that. So I'll also get some information on that.
Great.
Okay, we're good with that topic for now. Table it to another one, maybe.
Yep.
All right, asset limits. This again is a topic that we are not saying you need to do this or you shouldn't do this. We are informing you that it's out there, it's a topic. My gut instinct is I'm not gonna be surprised if the council directs us not to look at asset, to not take assets into consideration, to not have this in our covenant, but I could be wrong. So I want to just throw it out there. I'm not encouraging you to do it or not do it. So what this is gonna be, main question for you. Does council want to clarify the amount along with exceptions that they would recommend if they want to consider having asset limits in the standard? So in other words, Breckenridge and Summit County have began for some of their units, asset testing. So if you have a certain amount of assets, you will not qualify to buy that property. And that it takes a lot more work, obviously, on the housing authority's part, as they do digging into people's kind of financial situations. People's complaints about this too, is you don't know if you've had a relative who passed away and you happen to recently inherit money or a house from them, and you're trying to figure it out, could that prohibit you purchasing it? That's not a good or bad answer, it's just things to think about. We believe that asset limits are reviewed primarily because we do hear from, so we don't have assets, but we have limits in Frisco. We obviously all have friends who apply to units outside of Frisco within Summit County or other locations that do have these. We get a lot of complaints from people just grumbling to us that they don't think it's fair that somebody who has enough money to buy a market rate unit got to buy, they got to buy the unit this other person was in the lottery for, and they don't think it's fair. So that is the reason why you would limit how much assets you can have to basically say that homeowner, that household has enough money, we think they could buy a market rate unit, therefore they shouldn't apply for this lottery.
And currently, we do not look at assets.
We do not look at assets.
Do we look at all forms of income?
We look at based on taxes, essentially, whatever they submit for taxes.
How many years they live here, how much they've been making for the last 2 or 3 years. So they can make a $40,000, $45,000 job, keep it down, have $500,000 in the bank. Or have a 401k for some other business, and they qualify because of their low income. And that's happened a bunch. And I've seen some people who, have done that and bought restaurants, it's like you're in our restricted covenant unit and you just went out and bought a restaurant, but it's, I think there should be, I don't know where it should be at, but if you have $500,000 in the bank in your income and you know that and you get into
See, what I'm not understanding. If you have $500,000 in the bank, should be creating income.
It
You
is.
have your own, it should be creating income, whether it's passive income in a 401k or you own a house in Des Moines and you're collecting rent off of it. That does show up in your calculation, right?
I don't think it does. I think they're just looking at your job, what you get paid from your career, your job, your paychecks.
So, or if they're checking, if their tax return is part of their application, it should be reported as income. Now,
So I can get
Not
more
everybody
info
does.
from that. I think.
I'd like to add something into this. If I can. Am I on mute? No, you can hear me?
no, we can hear.
Okay, we sort of do this already in that you're not allowed to own another residential dwelling anywhere in the world if you own one of these units.
Do we do
Is
that?
that true?
It is in our
That-
covenants
that
that you
is
cannot
on the
own, you
covenant,
cannot be the owner
so-
of another property.
This is, we are completely hindering people that way, where it's like, what if What if you were left a property in Kansas? You know, and what, you're not allowed to live in your deed restricted unit because your mother left you a place, you know, or, you know, like you can, like Dan was saying, you know, you can own your unit and then you can buy a business, you can own a commercial space, but you cannot own another residential unit in the country, in the world. And that is hindering people from upward mobility for sure. Just putting that out there.
Currently, if someone did inherit a property after they purchased, would they be required then to sell their unit?
If that was strictly in their name and it came up during monitoring, then yes. We have worked with people who have a living relative in poor health and have put their name on that trust or that house property as a second name so that they didn't have to worry when that ill relative passed away. It made it clear for legal reasons for them. We have allowed certain circumstances like that in respect for, they're not living there, they're not paying the mortgage, nothing is under their names, they're there as a legal precaution when that person relative passes away. So that probably isn't the way we're supposed to handle it, but that is
That's an
all.
asset limit.
Trying to be a little more conscientious of people when we look at that type of situation, staff during the monitoring period.
How long, when is monitoring period random?
Every
Each
year in the fall, it's going to switch to be more based on when you purchased. Stagger them, because it's a lot of work for all the towns and housing authority, but it's right now every year.
I think philosophically, restricting after someone has purchased a unit, restricting their ability at any point to gain wealth to keep their home kind of puts people in a corner that, like I said, philosophically I'm concerned about. But I also see the reasons where, to Gibby's point, the system might have been, you know, mishandled by people.
Yeah, and we can definitely add this as a topic. It probably should have been, and I apologize, I kind of overlooked it. The whole selling of another property or owning the second property definitely can get added. Staff doesn't have a concern, and some of them covenants in other towns or counties say you can't own in the county, you can't own in the state. There's all different options for it, or just don't have.
In a
it.
lot of times, they've done the can't own another property in the state because it's very difficult for us to administratively track down whether somebody owns property in another state. You know, they could be holding it under an LLC, they could, you know, there's all sorts of different ways to do that, and it just becomes a lot of administrative work to try and find that.
Let's put another scenario. How about you own a house there, you get married. They're not on the deed, you are, and then they own the property.
In theory, that I believe, I haven't been aware of that in Frisco, but I believe it's happened in the county or another jurisdiction in that they've had to sell one.
They have.
I believe so.
I'm viewing it that, Mark, to your point, there's assets to qualify to buy, and then assets obtained after purchase.
Yeah.
And I fundamentally have a resistance to forcing people out because of their success. We want to encourage success, not discourage it. So. So. Pre-purchase, I still sort of have, maybe it's a naive belief that people with assets are earning something from them. So that should be part of the qualification process. If you have another house, that shouldn't preclude you. But maybe you impute income into it if they choose to leave it vacant. I'm not, that's complicating it.
Yeah.
But I think we fundamentally feel strongly that after you appropriately and properly qualified for a deed restricted house, whether you get 6 promotions or sadly somebody dies and you inherit money, or you marry well, I don't want to put you out. You earned your way in. I don't want to displace you. So that's a different.
Is a general consensus if staff works on some language to that effect?
To me.
Remember that concept because we're gonna talk about enforcing deed restrictions at some point.
And I'll give you the preview. I also was saying when you get a job in a different jurisdiction. Just because you were offered a successful position in a different town doesn't mean you should have to leave our housing. We applaud people for success.
But you have to at this point. And
Right.
right, and it's like if how does that apply? It's really like your neighbors have to rat you out. Right? Cause it's kind of like, how do we really know where anybody's working and how much? And it's
No,
not,
the new SCHA is probably better, or hopefully that's their charge. So if all of a sudden they figure out a way to do it.
It does
It can
create
happen.
this interesting social environment where neighbors are kind of. All know that there's this standard and there's this limit and suddenly secrets are being kept.
Mhm.
Well, I think that's why a lot of these conversations come up, because they are really linked.
Well, nobody should have to be ashamed of
Well,
telling
and-
them where they work.
as a manager, I don't wanna have my staff. Have something in writing that they're supposed to be enforcing, but they're having to make a judgment. Based on the council saying, we don't wanna kick anybody out, so we're gonna ignore.
It's a fair point.
What's in our regulation, I'd rather have it written the right way. That we wanna enforce.
But that's the hard thing, is getting rid of the right way. With all this.
That's why we have Katie.
Yeah.
Did read it and edit it.
Cause I've been reading all this stuff and it's like, it's a little,
It's complicated.
Yeah, it is. And then, we have different covenants on different properties, so are we doing this covenant change just for Peak One neighborhood?
No.
I know that, but that's the hard thing now of trying to get all these eggs in one nest when they were never in one nest before, so I have a hard time with that. And I look at this restrictions that we're doing right now as being a Peak One neighborhood issue because of the 80 AMI to the 160, where other ones aren't that. They're sitting in the 80 to 120 or something, so it's a different thing. So like I've said before, one shoe doesn't fit all. And we're trying to put all the shoes in one box, and I don't think that's possible. I don't know,
I wanna share, I agree, but I also, the way I've gotten my head around this. This isn't a Peak One conversation, this is a Frisco deed restriction conversation. We're hopefully, again, this is where I'm at, we're gonna create a deed restriction that is the best for all stakeholders going forward. If anybody with a deed restriction wants to opt into whatever it is we create, they'll have that option. If they prefer what they have, we're not mandating that they accept this, so this is not, in my head, this is not a conversation about current Peak One residents. This is a conversation.
right, and
future-
for current other deed restricted owners in town.
Right, so they'll all have the same opportunity, we're hopefully gonna come out of this with the best deed restriction, with the most knowledge that we can come up with. And if somebody wants to opt into it, love to have.
but I don't think any town has had that. I don't think does any town have one, well, I guess Breckenridge is cut down, they change it like
Yeah,
a bunch of times. So
yeah,
They have
and
theirs there,
everyone's
but
been
they,
narrowing it down to what they think would be best. Now, some too, I believe, and I'm trying not to look at Lena, because I know he knows the answers, but I don't. Trying not to look over there, but I believe that some of the Summit County ones have the new template, and when you sell your property, I believe the new buyer might have to go into that standard covenant. And so there is a requirement for people to go into certain covenants around the community, I believe. That's a topic we'll have in a later one once we know what we're doing. But, and I could be wrong, but I think that was the case for like Soda Creek and Anchor maybe.
Right, so this is an opt-in. Or as we build new stock that's for sale, then these are the only options they end up with. They don't get to pick one of the 145 other deed restrictions in Summit County.
Hopefully correct.
And Kimmy, do you think that kind of, helps with your position? If people are willing to keep what they have, then their egg doesn't have to be thrown in the basket. But if they want their egg to be thrown in the basket. I see what you're saying, but I think that does help mitigate it a little bit.
Yeah, it's a hard one because, you're looking at the AM, our. One thing that the people in neighborhoods kind of complain about is is the lesser of. Okay, so they either stay with the lesser of, or we're gonna change the covenant and we're gonna go 3%. Or we're gonna go 5% and there's no AMI on there, okay, so possible. So that's, that's those people that are in that AMI and the people in the neighborhood, they're gonna still be kind of shy, whatever, Cause as I'm getting it, we're not using the AMI chart, but maybe using it for some calculation or,
Really,
it's
really,
just-
that decision is up to you guys.
all of them are up to us,
I know.
all of them, and you're getting too many freaking options, there's too much stuff out there.
That's their, but whatever we choose for that one topic. If they say, oh, that's good for me, but then they might come in and say, oh, but we're going to a lottery system for the sale, and I wanna sell it to my Uncle Joe. Well, they can't have that deed restriction.
They'll have to make it
Because the new deed restriction says this, so they get the package. Or what they have,
So
the package is to be determined.
another thing I read on there is the AMI when they bought it. And then the AMI with the new AMI chart, and it was percentage. How's that? I saw that on some things. Am I right about that?
So the AMI has always been the same.
No, but the AMI of
You're talking resale calculation.
resale calculations.
So there.
So I saw that on
In the
there.
original, I saw this too, in
Okay.
the original deed restriction. There was the 3% increase or the percentage
Oh, yeah, the
change
lesser.
of AMI.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
so that's,
yes.
I was reading that today. I'm like, oh, that's a different one now.
Yeah.
And then, so
So that,
how'd that work?
yeah, luckily we have this one. Yeah, so the way that is, let's say, someone purchased in 2014. And, sorry, can't quite read the numbers from here, but whatever that 2014 number is, I think it's, thank you. You're gonna look at 2014 and then you're gonna look at the year they're selling, so we don't have 20, I guess let's look at
Yeah.
23, so 110. You're gonna look at that difference between the year they bought and the year they wanna sell. And you see if that difference is lesser of and I think I have that original. Yeah.
The lesser of 3% or something? Okay, so it could still probably be 3%.
So you've got 3% a year if you add all that.
Yeah.
Or you take the percent increase between the year they bought and the year they sold.
It's still a tie to the AMI table, it's just a different tie than the 2019 standard.
Yeah.
Has it.
And the reason that this was brought to us as a complaint, which led us to the 2019 one, was because there was so much uncertainty in what your percentage increase or decrease was between when you sold and when you purchased and when you were gonna sell. So people felt like they didn't like such an uncertainty in what the numbers were gonna come out with in the future. And that was why one of the reasons that staff was requested to stop that calculation of the lesser of.
Yeah. And then Katie, if you have one unit, so say you have one unit, or two units that are both 100% AMI, but one unit has turned owners 4 times, and one unit is the original owners, right? Doesn't that value of the 4-time turned unit get raised in there?
Theoretically, yes.
Yeah.
because
And
You're adding the real estate fees in there and,
correct.
there's stuff that gets added at sale that you get to calculate into your resale value that the person that owned it longer would not have.
Right, right. So this is a little bit of how we're hindering those that have been there a long time, as opposed to, you know, it turning over and all. And just along with that, it would be great to have some sort of figure of like, what is churn supposed to be in these situations? You know, are we supposed to turn 20% of these units per year? Are we supposed to, is it typical to just, you know, churn 3% of these units per year? You know, what is reasonable that way? And then, you know, that's how there becomes this discrepancy with your AMI level, and these, you know, or at least peak one being voted in by the people was supposed to be a diverse AMI group. And, you know, so as all these things change, as you build a garage and everything else, then, you know, all of that changes. You know, I'm not saying that that's good or bad, but, you know, it's.
So Andy,
Yeah, please.
can I clarify one of the things you were asking there? You were asking about typical, what should the town expect in churn?
Well, yeah.
Or turnover of units? And I would expect that market rate units would have a different. It would be hard to compare to market rate units because they're
Yeah,
a
you gotta
different
keep them
kind of
separate.
buyer in our market than deed restricted units. So the only comparison would be other deed restricted properties or deed restricted projects.
Of course, because we're holding these people to this 3% or whatever, your $300,000, and the same exact house across the street is going for $2 million now. Because that's market value. You gotta separate those out. Like market value doesn't count.
Yeah. I was thinking we could probably look at, you know, we keep bringing up the Wellington neighborhood as something similar. We could look at that neighborhood and see what its turnover has been to see if that's anything comparable.
Mhm.
Where's the Wellington neighborhood at though? I think the bricks are a little lower. There is Wellington up to.
Behind 7-Eleven in Breckenridge.
I think the Wellington neighborhood ranges,
Is it up to 160?
are they between 80 and 160?
So only the 80% units have income testing.
Oh, okay.
So they were priced similarly to Peak One when they were originally up for sale, and that was around the 120 to 125% AMI for pricing. But you don't have the confusion of two AMIs because there's not income testing.
Interesting. That makes it more complicated.
Yes,
As a comparison, but there might be another neighborhood out in.
Cause I was looking at, a lot of them weren't as high as our, you know, as our neighborhood, they were more like 120 or 80 to 120 or something. It was on the sheet there.
So I'm looking through some of the old ones to see if any of these will help. So one last question on asset limits. I definitely heard. We're probably not looking at them once you purchase a property. We're not gonna. Don't wanna penalize someone or keep them out if they came into money or got a better job or inherited a second house or bought a second house. The one thing I guess I'm not sure where we're going, if we're ready to give direction, is if we should look at asset limits for the initial purchase. The household purchasing. I think I heard both sides to that, so. How should I bring that back for discussion? And that would be along the lines of, does the council want to look at asset limits for a qualifying household? And maybe we need to find out from the housing authority the answer to Andy's question and Andrew's question about what they actually see when they qualify.
So in bracket in Blue 52, they do not include retirement accounts, health savings in their asset. I would be okay with that. I mean, you know, someone who was responsible for many, many years, putting money away in their 401k or their IRA and for their future, I don't think they should be penalized if they still have a job that meets.
Yeah.
My only strong thought is not putting a dollar in it. whether it's a percentage of the home price or some formula, so that it doesn't become obsolete. Time frame it until we have to do this again. So. I like not including things that are societal helpers, like with HSAs and college savings, 529s, all that stuff. The rest of it, I just, if you've got a big bucket of assets and you're not.
In capital property, yeah.
Shame on you. You know, I don't know.
Like, I don't really agree with Summit County's position. You know, at time of purchase, buyer's assets must be less than $200,000 income. I mean, it's like, if you're at a certain AMI level and you qualify for a home at that AMI level, not at 20% over that AMI level, if you qualify for 100% AMI home, you know, I don't see that why we should be limiting everything else these people can be into.
Andy, I'm sorry. Because the way I'm seeing it for me is assets that kind of way Andrew put it are seen as a positive in our society that give incentives to save or to take care of their kids or their health, retirement accounts, you know, college accounts. I consider that a separate pool of assets. You know, that money sequestered so they can't go out and, you know, go on vacations with that money and buy things with that, but that's sequestered money. But if they showed up at, oh, well, I'm only making $40,000, but I just inherited 1.2 million and sitting in a low interest savings account. Well, yeah, bad on them for not knowing what to do with that 1.2 million, but they still have 1.2 million, which increases their wealth considerably. And I think that would be, in that scenario, that would be an issue for them.
Well, that's almost just like, you know, you qualify for 100% AMI, but your mother's giving you your down payment and everything else because you didn't have your down payment.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with that a similar concept. I just didn't want to call out people's moms.
Well, you know. You know, that has always been a thing where it's like, you know, and maybe that's just a personal thing because I never had that, right? I didn't have somebody backing me that way. And so many people have become successful here because they had those backers, you know, and I don't know if those people that are backed that way should be qualifying for, you know, that 100% level. So that's where that question is there. You know, it's like you're hindering somebody who really can't afford anything else, period, by somebody who's got wealthy backers.
And how do you police that in every instance? It's difficult, I'm sure, too.
Well, the other thing is assets, you know, they have a Sprinter van, a camper, boat, you know, that doesn't qualify, that's not coming out of application. You know, they're not, you know, I have a $100,000 Sprinter van. You know, that's not showing up on any application or anything, you know, and you're buying a deed restricted unit and, you know, you have an Airstream or you have, you know, I don't know, it's because like Andy, I've never had that. You see people on deed restricted, you know, they have a brand new car, they have brand new cars, a camper, you know, I feel like, you know, I don't know, I think there needs to be, you know, if we're gonna keep it for people who really, you know, need the help that, you know.
And the other.
I don't know how to do it, but I just see it as just an unequal playing field.
Which these things are, you're not allowed to have in Peak One.
What's that?
Winter van or a camper or anything like that.
You're not allowed to store, you mean you're not allowed to store it there?
You're not allowed to store it there.
Yeah, part of it is though, wherever the asset comes from, you gotta pay the mortgage. Like, I mean, just because your mother gives you, you know, $50,000 down payment. You can't go buy $1 million house if you're earning 65,000 a year. You can't afford the mortgage. So it's just I'm only relaying another level of complication of having a gift for a down payment doesn't necessarily translate to the ability to afford a market rate house.
Sure, if the gift doesn't reach that standard, right, if it's $50,000, that's not gonna get you.
If the person's making enough money to be able to afford a $500,000 deed restricted house, they can't. It's not.
No.
Very hard
You know,
to
they,
police,
they
right?
have a plane somewhere, you know, they have a plane, I'm using $100,000 Sprinter van or something, but what if they have an asset, they have a plane in somewhere else, you know, and it's. I don't know, it's a hard thing, like you said, it's a hard thing, where do you cut their asset limit, you know?
And again, I'm asking questions because I don't know the answers. What's the town's goal? You know, we have a deed restricted unit that we want to put somebody in. And this whole conversation is, who do we want to put in that unit, or who do we want to keep out of that unit? And that's hard.
Yeah, but that's listed by the AMI, right? So the question is just, maybe they're at a certain AMI level, but they're from wealthy backing. I don't know that you can't really control that too
Right,
much.
that's the question. Do we want to get involved in that?
Yeah, on their asset sheet, and you can't say, well, are your parents wealthy? You can't do that.
Well, if you think about it under the way that buyers are acquired today, you can bring the buyer. So the seller is choosing that buyer. Whereas if you have under a lottery system, if you have a buyer that has significant assets and a buyer, both get qualified, a buyer that doesn't have significant assets, the lottery is going to choose that.
It equalizes it a little bit.
It could equalize it in some way. I don't know if it does or not. It just so.
A little bit. What does? It takes out that guarantee that someone who does have a financial backer is automatically gonna be more in a position, like it takes away that that's a guarantee.
Meaning in the
buyer,
in the seller takes,
yeah,
or in the lot.
in the lottery.
Oh, I was thinking the other way.
No, so like you have two people going into the lottery. One has 0 assets. One has secret supporting assets. The lottery is neutral to either, right? It's neutral to either, right? So it's a random pick. So in some way that mitigates the power that the person who has maybe the secret assets has in approaching the mortgage, the market.
Because to the seller, the person with the supplemental assets far more likely to get the house.
I think that's been pretty clear in a lot of deed restriction areas where things strangely work out that way.
You know, as you said, Andrew, too, who do we want in these houses? What I would want in these houses is people who've been living here for 15, 20 years, 10 to 20 years that haven't had the money and have been here and been citizens of this town. And they might not have assets. They probably don't, and they're trying to get in. That's the people I looking at a lot that should be the first ones trying to get into these units, and not the person who just got here 2 years ago, 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Those people that have been here for 20 years being an asset to our community should be ahead of people who just moved here 2 to 5 years.
But then the lotteries generally don't account.
No,
Well, they
You could do
can.
an extra
Well, they
ticket.
can, right?
You
Yeah.
could do an extra ticket for that, which we'll bring up if the council is supportive of a lottery. And then coming down to, so for example, our housing helps unit, we do a lottery, and I think we recently made it 5 years. Thank you, James. So you get an extra ticket if you lived here for 5 years or longer. So it doesn't guarantee that you're gonna knock everybody else out, but you at least get an extra shot in the lottery for your longevity, whether it's living in town, working in town, there's all different factors that we.
Jumping ahead to a topic probably for next time, but are we in agreement that longevity in town in some way should be respected? in what you're factoring into.
I am.
I think so.
I don't see an issue.
We
Yeah.
can go ahead and write it, frame it that way.
Rather low line.
Anything
Can I
that you
ask-
have a consensus on will help us narrow it down. Yeah, sorry, Andy.
Yeah, no, and this is completely off topic, but in a quorum, if three of us agree and there is an outlier, does that still count as a democratic approval? It does that?
Yes, a majority of a quorum rules, except
Okay.
in there are some limited circumstances under the charter where you need more than that, but a majority of a quorum will rule in most instances.
Okay, that's just been a question for me for a long time. Thank you.
Recap, I think we're pretty good. Do you want me to read through the recap questions on kind of what I heard? Yes.
Yes, please.
Alright, so would council like to include an income buffer which would allow prospective buyers to have a higher household income than what is currently allowed? For future discussion, we're going to draft it to stay the same as is in the housing 2019 covenant, which is if it doesn't go under contract within 30 days, you get a 20% buffer. However, we're also gonna remind the council that another conversation came up regarding the 10% or after 90 days, looking at it that way. But it's right now, our consensus is leaning towards 20% increase after 30 days. The 2019 covenant does not have a maximum cap on the amount of qualified capital improvements an owner may add to their sale price. Would council like this change? Potentially, but it's going to come down to how the rest of the resale calculation comes into play. It's using the chart and or not using the chart and using more of a standard calculation such as 2 or 3 times a year. And then that discussion will take place again. The town currently does not limit assets when a buyer has when qualifying to be a purchaser. If the council wants to consider having it clarified. So we broke it down into two categories. One, household home purchase. And then after you purchase a property, we're gonna remove some language that's our standard language right now about owning another property, things like that. To be more flexible to assets after you already are in a unit. And then for when you go to actually initially purchase a unit, we're a little up in the air and we may consider some type of assets, but we wanna be strategic on if we do it, because we definitely don't want to take off investments people have, such as health insurance or retirement plans, college funds, that kind of thing. So no set answer, but I think at least we're on a track of narrowing down the discussion. And then the last one was after reviewing additional information on maximum resale calc from last meeting that was provided in your packet. Don't have any other questions or direction for staff tonight before we see you again. Well, we'll see you again before this discussion, but before we see you again for this discussion.
Likely the next discussion is not gonna be until early December. Based on schedules.
Martin has his hat on, which means we're getting ready to go. The only question I have is, all right, we dived in a little bit. How do we keep moving forward on this? Is, you know, I've thought about like, should we have a checklist or a spreadsheet or do a poll, and all of a sudden, if the 4 of us agree on half of these things, then we can sort of just say, done. How do we move through this, because it's a lot?
And actually, Tom had that idea, he was editing some of this, the staff report that staff starts kind of a list of topics in the introduction we've heard of the questions and the main topics, so I think we can provide that for you to keep it outlined, and then the next questions that you asked, how everyone wants to provide feedback.
It's easy for staff to do something like a poll on some of these ones that we kind of grabbed onto to kind of know the direction. Just want to confirm it. I mean, whatever can make staff their effort a little bit easier.
For us, I don't want to spend 20 minutes talking about something we all agree on.
Yeah. I like to see some progress, and we definitely, that one we nabbed, and we're getting closer instead of like, Well, depends on that, it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
And I think tonight helped, even if it seemed like it was a lot of conversation, I think we actually narrowed it down a lot. To where the next, and the topics that are left, I kind of sounding like hearing consensus on a lot of them, such as the lottery. They're not, I can't picture, I would have to look to remember what they are, but. Oh. That might help if you get a reminder, we'll talk about. Duration of time to opt into the new covenant and should the 2019 covenant be extinguished, so that's kind of a final topic after you have this problem, how you wanna handle it in the future. Definition of resident, that is primarily just looking at job status. We've had the question about, should you work in Summit County or 10 Mile Basin? Or the town of Frisco like we have right now for a priority period. So what should a resident be defined as when they qualify? I think the initial purchase price will be pretty easy. We're gonna recommend we just use the price off of the chart for that. Buyer selection would be a lottery discussion, which it sounds like we're on a track with. And then if we want a priority period for an employment location. So for example, right now we limit it within the town of Frisco boundary, and then after 30 days, it goes out wider. If you want to just open it forever to Summit County, for example, or have a priority period. So I feel like those conversations you'll probably be able to define pretty easily. Maybe.
Can I add one more thing to that?
Yeah, please.
You know, it's of the buyer and the lottery and all that, you know. And as we want people to move up in, you know, a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom, a 1-bedroom to something like that, you know. Do those people have the first choice, you know, like before, pick one neighbor, they found their buddy, okay, and they got the place. Now, what if somebody in that neighborhood really wants to move up to the bigger unit and wants to go up? You know, some people can't go up, but people could. How do they fit into that lottery? So just keep that in mind. Or people that are in a 2-bedroom condo off Main Street that wanna move into a house. You know, do they
But
get?
still in the deed restricted bubble though.
Yeah. You know, would they be able to get, you know, move up quicker? You
Well,
know,
if
So
you
just
did
keep
this,
that
yeah.
in mind, you know, I'm not sure what the answer is, but you know, people complain that they can't move up, they're stuck in their units and all that, and if we just go out to a lottery and they're not in the, you know,
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's a good
That's
point.
one thing.
And I'd also request we add how you move down, because we also have people who can't get a smaller unit and they want a smaller unit based on their kids have moved out or they've retired and they're taking up extra bedrooms that a family can fit to, but they don't have another, so it kind of goes both ways.
That sounds great.
Just
Sounds great. I didn't think of it.
That is on your resident
Can
definition.
I add something to that?
Oh, geez, Andy.
Yes.
Andy, that was Kimmy who said
So
that.
wait, this is one of the things that we have not defined as a buddy, which is, are we creating the ability for upward mobility? Or are we just keeping things cheap for the next people coming in for perpetuity? And so we have not actually defined that. And that was something that we've talked about a little bit, and we were all split on that idea. You know, for me, I think it's wholly important that we're putting these people, these are not rental units, right? These are owned units. And I think it's wholly important that we're creating the ability for people to have mobility. It's not just about like, yeah, they can sell and leave town and then get the next people in for as cheap as it's gonna be. That was something that was said by some of our council. And I just don't, you know, I don't agree with that particular thing, in that I think we should be creating within this framework the ability to have mobility. That's
Just
along
because
the-
I like to have the last word.
No, I'm more or less just agreeing with you, Dan, but that backs up,
No,
you know, what we're talking about here, and we should talk about these things too, because Andy might not agree, I don't know, but you know, that's on there as well. This is part of the whole discussion, I believe, that we just don't talk about or haven't talked about.
Andy, when you say move up, you're talking about using strategies and a focus that will allow people to move into the market or move into larger
No.
deed restriction.
There's no way to move.
Yeah,
this.
I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah, that
There's
was
just
going to be
no
my.
way. And actually, somebody on our council was able to do that, right? And, you know, these are a little bit of the questionable things of, well, how were you in the deed restricted in the first place? You know, like, so I don't know. I'm not, you know, pointing any fingers or anything, but we have somebody on council that's done that successfully who believes, well, I did it. Everybody else should be able to do it too.
So then just to be clear, then you're looking at, when you say mobility, you're looking at mobilities that people have the opportunity maybe to move into a nicer or larger deed restricted unit.
Or down, yes.
Or down, yeah, or down.
Mobility
Okay.
for whatever it is your circumstance is bringing, but you know, because the bottom line is otherwise you are selling and leaving Summit County, period. You know, I mean, that's it. Because you got nowhere else to go and you're not going to be able to afford anything else once you get out of here. And so that's all part of the thing. Like, I don't think that should be part of the equation, that's the only way to get out of your deed restricted home. And granted, there are a few people within Peak One that did get to move up. You know, Katie Oakes managed to buy Nicole and Josh Wyckoff's place when they left town because they couldn't afford it here anymore. You know, and she's a teacher and she moved up to a little bigger place as her family's growing. And so that kind of worked, you know, and so I don't know why, what, how, of why that worked. It worked because of the not lottery system. It worked because your friend wants your place and you made it available for your friend. And so that, you know, negates the lottery right there if that's how it's going to work. But, you know, so that's where it's just, you know, so that if you don't opt into this, then you can't go that option. And that's where that gets us back to the beginning where Andy was talking about, you know, well, if you don't opt in, then you can choose to not be part of the lottery, right? But that's just the position we're in. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying this is just an issue that we should consider, you know.
Appreciate it. Anything else? Because Andy, you're in New York, right?
No, I'm back now. I came back today.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't planning on it, but I did.
Hope everything was well there. Katie, you have a sick child to go get to. Thank you again, my last time to apologize for CDOT making me late. But we are adjourned.
Not everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Stop there, space to the.
Easy.
Yeah. I'll you get over here, you don't have to do anything on it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Or like a herd of turtles, or we're getting somewhere.
No,